Hi, my name is Crystal Raby, and I will be presenting an analysis of the documentary film 13th by Ava DuVernay. So the three themes I will be covering in this presentation include institutional racism, internalized racism, and white privilege. Now, institutional racism are things like the legal and prison system that were brought about by the movie, internalized racism that results from it and from continued incarceration, things like that, and as well as the white privilege, the economic differential between whites and blacks, the media perceptions of the dominant culture, things like that. So during the NPR interview with Miss DuVernay, she talked about a lot of things that the movie had to say, including the topics of the prison systems being the modern conduits for racism and control over people of color. She talked about how blacks were overrepresented in the prison population and how it's not a bad place, a place where bad people go. It's really another form of institutional racism. So in the analysis of the film, I found that most commentators in the movie did believe that institutional racism was an issue and will continue. It is rebranded over time. Right now, it's the prison system. They're talking about the future being GPS monitoring within people's own community. So there's internalized racism from that as well. So in order to avoid these punishments, there's like a reward punishment system. So, blacks are rewarded with resources for aligning with the dominant culture, which, Caucasians, and it's brought about also by the movie Sorry to Bother You. They kind of hint towards that. Also, white privilege tends to be an issue. So tax reform tends to benefit, rich whites, welfare and the propaganda of what, welfare recipients are to the elite white culture. And so blacks continue to be excluded from the mainstream. So some of the effects on the African American community we can clearly see in the movie. They talked about the unfortunate event of Khalif Browder, and I mean there were many, many more, over the years. Physiological health issues, across the board we see African Americans dying at a younger rate. The book mentions infant mortality highest among blacks compared to other races. We also see internalized racism. It creates like a discord within the community. And there are others who are defying the dominant culture vehemently versus others who are kind of, acclimating to it. And so unification efforts, when it comes to efforts like BLM and Black Panthers, becomes, diminished. And you get confused identity and worldview among blacks. Also, there's a consistent theme of white privilege, in the movie. As far as the interview with NPR, Ava DuVernay mentions that there are different sentences for different people. So based on the fact if you're white and have money, you'll get off a lot easier. So then this also creates issues because, then there's this white privilege acts as a barrier between those who want to communicate with each other, and there's a different worldview, a different outlook on things. So what does this mean for the future? How are we improving? What's getting better? What's getting worse? What's being stagnant? I think institutional racism is improving slowly. I think people are starting to notice it. I know in the medical field they've done numerous studies on it, and doctors have actually come forward in different like TED Talks and things like that, sharing their unconscious biases within the medical field, and also in other institutions it's begun to pop up as well. So with internalized racism, it's continuing to improve as well. We have, the Black is Beautiful movement, natural hair movement, things like that, invigorating Black people to unite, faster circulation of social media, solidifying Blacks as well. White privilege, with newer technology, awareness is improving among the white community. However, there is some backlash when some white people are really emotional when their, current position is threatened. So they tend to have the opposite effect. So in conclusion, we talked about institutionalized racism, internalized racism, and white privilege. So most people are hopeful, but they do think that racism and, slavery